Hi, my name's Dick Braunton and I'm Randomfish. Hit that subscribe button and let's be Randomfishes together, shall we? Now, obviously, I've set up the camera, obviously, so I'm sat down to talk about this. I've done a lot of talking about American shows on this channel, and I wanted to remedy that. So I want to talk about a British show. Now, when I say British show, I do legitimately mean something from the country that I have grown up in. I'm not one of these people that's a British nationalist. I don't think that we're the greatest country in the world, mainly because I've been to other countries. But, you know, potato, potato. So, I've been looking at old British shows from when I was growing up. Specifically from the 90s through to the 2005, 2008, that sort of area, because that's mainly when I sort of had to officially stop kidding myself and fully acknowledge the fact that I was in fact an adult, and I had to, you know, watch adult themed shows. Not that that really stopped me. So all the way from the time that I was old enough to watch shows through, I started watching a lot of random stuff on TV. I watched a lot of American shows as well, and a lot of animated shows, including Superman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, Batman the Animated Series, X-Men Evolution, Spider-Man 1994 show, a whole bunch of stuff. But I wanted to look at the British shows that I watched, and one of them stood out amongst everything else. Once upon a time, in the land of the BBC Broadcasting House, there was a fox that could talk. His name was Basil Brush, and he had a show from 1963 all the way to 1984, where unfortunately the puppeteer who voiced him and did all the actions for him unfortunately passed away. Then, sometime after 1984, about 21 years, I'd say, not 11, but 21 years after that man passed away, the show was relit, if you will. It's not even 21 years. It's less than that. It's barely over the 20-year mark. The show itself was relit back in 2002, I believe. And it didn't stop again until 2007, 2008. So in that time period, we had the arrival of the new version of Basil Brush, which I have to say, when watching the old shows back, in comparison to what I saw from that Basil Brush show in 2002, I'm sorry to say this, but the older version isn't better. As I've grown up, I've begun to sort of appreciate the validity of older and original pieces of art and film and TV over the new stuff, because the new stuff just might have taken away the soul, it might have botched up the message, it might just have really shitty CGI. But in this case, in the case of a kids' TV show, I'd like to point out, the remake actually does better than the original. Basil Brush show ran, like I said, from 2002, 2007, 2008. And in that time period, we had the fox living in a flat. I don't know where, but I'm going to guess about London, South London-ish maybe. And in that flat, there were a bunch of people that interchanged over the course of the seasons. Throughout most of the seasons, though, it was the same group of people. A man called Mr. Stephen, and his nephew and niece, Molly and Dave. These characters were very interesting, and they were very cool to sort of watch. And Basil Brush was very much the same character that you would see a lot of in these shows. Very cheeky, very adventurous, very sarcastic, very fourth wall breaky. Basil Brush could sort of almost be, you know, puppets on TV could almost be referred to as their own versions of Deadpool, which I think is kind of cool as a concept. But even within that sort of world, Basil Brush talked a lot to the camera, and there was all of that sort of stuff. And anyway, I'm going to go into the characters. The characters, obviously, like I said before, Mr. Stephen, Molly, and Dave. There are a bunch of other side characters, I'll get to them in a minute, but these are the main focuses. Mr. Stephen is a failed children's entertainer. He's essentially the sad sack of the show. He's constantly being put down by every other member of cast, including Basil, Molly, Dave, Anil, one of the side characters. Again, I'll get to him in a minute. But he's constantly being put down all the time, and he never gets a break. And I genuinely feel sorry for this guy half the time. Not because I think that he deserves a win or something, but in my head I'm going like, I just feel so sorry for someone who tried his dream and it failed utterly miserably. Now, obviously, the guy who plays him doesn't have that issue. In fact, actually, at the moment, I don't know if they're still doing it now, but at one point over the last year, maybe a couple of years ago now, the guy that played Mr. Steven, Chris Pezzi, don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but I believe it's something like that, and Mr. Basil Brush himself went out on tour, on the big Fox tour, and they did, they do stand-up and scenes, and they sign things, and they do, all sorts of stuff that you would do for a kid's comedy show. And bear in mind, it's just a guy and a puppet. I think that's a pretty cool concept as a kid's show, in all, I really do. Then you've got the two other actors who played Molly and Dave. Now, Dave, we haven't heard anything from much. I think he's been in one, maybe two other pieces since Basil Brush ended. I don't think he really stuck around in the acting thing. I don't know if it's because he just didn't feel like there was much left he could really do, or if he sort of had ended up in the Basil Brush show as a coincidence and just didn't think that acting was the correct path for him, or whatever. I don't know. But the idea is that he's not seen anymore, but he is remembered and he is thanked for his contributions, and it's wonderful. Let's move on to Molly, though, because the girl that plays Molly is actually kind of cool. She's all grown up now and was in Harry Potter. More specifically, she played Katie Bell in Half-Blood Prince. I was saying the girl that, was floating above the necklace and the silent screaming and the mentality. That was kind of cool. That was kind of cool to watch. Disturbing as hell for the rest of the audience, but for me, I was sitting there grinning from ear to ear, so something's clearly wrong with me. But those are the three main characters that live in this flat with Basil. And the show usually goes along the lines of either Dave has some harebrained scheme to make money, Molly forces Stephen and Basil to do something, or Stephen just wants to do something that he just feels he never gets a chance to do, and Basil spends the entire time going, no you can't, no you can't, no you can't. Again, I feel sorry for Stephen sometimes, I really do. The poor guy essentially gets shit on for most of the show, and it's really quite interesting to see, because these two, him and Basil, are meant to be best friends. At least that's the way I thought I saw it anyway. And I never really understood why he stayed there the whole time. Obviously he is Dave and Molly's uncle. He is their quote-unquote legal guardian. But if you really think about it, in one of the future seasons, I believe season 4 actually, he buggers off. He does. He buggers off and starts working in a fast food van somewhere. You don't even get a farewell episode from the poor guy. I mean, it's really quite sad to see. And considering that they work together now as actual partners on a stage doing live shows, I would have thought for a second that maybe the CBBC would have given him like a decent send-off or something. But apparently not. So, just a whole bunch of stuff there in that sort of setup. But he buggers off, and they bring in new characters to they bring in a new sidekick for Basil to sort of, use and abuse and make bad jokes with and blah, 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 blah. And it just felt really, it's quite cool to watch. But anyway, let's get into the side characters. We'll start off with the ones that replaced Mr. Steven in this. At the start of Series 4, you get introduced to two new characters. The first one being a guy called Liam, who is in some way related to Stephen. He turns up on the set wanting to try and find Stephen, and he ends up getting cast as the new psychic for Basil by mistake, because he's incredibly talented in various forms. But apparently the joke is he can't act for shit. But he somehow ends up still acting in the show. These fourth wall breaks are really hard to follow sometimes. They really are. It's quite funny, actually. But Liam obviously still sticks around, and he had, and there's a lot of fun had between him and Basil. But I don't think it ever had like the same spark and the same energy that Basil had with Stephen. I just don't see it. I didn't feel it as much for him. And then the other character that got introduced was Lucy, who is the niece of one of the other side characters. She comes in the first episode. She then gets taken in by Basil due to the fact that Molly, the actress playing Molly, obviously had other things going on, or she just wasn't as the company that made Basil Brush just didn't feel like she was that essential to the run of the show. So I'm hoping that she had gone off to do other projects and all this sort of thing, and that's why she was absent from the show, which I'm hoping. Not that I can really hope for anything. I mean, it's already happened. It's happened years and years ago. In fact, almost over 10 years ago now. That's kind of sad. Bloody hell, that is sad. Anyway, jeez, Lou. But here's the thing. When Molly obviously wasn't around as much, Lucy stepped in and started doing stuff for her. And then, halfway through the season, I think, or maybe halfway through the next season, in season 5 or something like that, they changed the actress. She stopped being played by this one girl and was replaced by another girl. Now, don't get me wrong, I just don't feel like the attitude was still there. Like, the first girl that played Lucy had some level of attitude about her. She felt like she had sort of that smiley child innocence, but inside was the mind of a real, a real sociopath, sort of working away, trying to figure out every possible angle to sort of really make the situation work to their advantage, and that was cool to see. And then this girl sort of come in, and she was fine. She did the job fine, but she felt more actually threatening, i.e. the kind of person that, you say something wrong to her and she gives you the death glare, and all of a sudden it's just all of a sudden. And I don't know, I guess for me at least, the character had already been derived from that previous actress, and I don't know, she did a fine job, don't get me wrong, she played the part absolutely fine. It's just, for me at least, I was sitting there being a bit like, really? You had to change it now? Okay, fine. I'm guessing the actress either couldn't do the show anymore, or they couldn't, or she had other engagements, or whatever. It was other things happen, actors change roles all the time, it's fine. But anyway, let's talk about Lucy's uncle, one of the other side characters, and he was around the entire run of the show, like Dave is really, called Anil. Now, Anil is the runner of a local cafe where the constant joke is that they go to the cafe because it's the only other set they've got. But the food in there is so rubbish that they don't honestly think they can still cope. It's one of those things where you're watching it and going, why haven't you been shut down? I know this works on TV logic, but please explain to me how you haven't even been shut down by TV standards. To put it in context, those of you who are the correct age, right? Anil's Cafe, the food they serve there is like, if they served that at a Weatherspoons, they'd say, I'm sorry, we need to take this back to the kitchen. That's how bad Anil's Cafe is, guys. It makes Weatherspoons look... Moving on. I don't wish to diss Weatherspoons. In fact, the fact that I've already done that is neither here nor there. But Anil is one of the other characters. He is very much a bumbling moneymaker, just like Dave is, except he's nothing like Dave in that he doesn't have the intelligence for it. Anil is a little bit of a crazy person. There's a little bit of a nod in one of the episodes where it's revealed he might have been an alien, and I'll be honest, that would make sense. Except for the fact that in the show, the aliens that work within that context also don't like or hate jokes. And yet somehow Anil seems to constantly be cracking jokes or trying very much to make Basil tell jokes. So either he's the ultimate rebel of his people, or I'm overanalyzing a kid's TV show. Which I sometimes do. You should hear my thoughts on some of this stuff on Milkshake on Channel 5 first thing in the morning. I wake up very early. It's so sad. But Anna is one of those characters. One of the other side characters are the interchanging female protagonist. I say protagonist. She's not even. There's not even like. She's not even taking that much of an interest. She's a side character, but different female characters will turn up all the time. The first one we had was a woman named Amanda. She was a food critic for a local newspaper, although you didn't see much of her do a job outside of the very first episode where she turned up. She seemed to be someone for Mr. Stephen to slobber over. And she was very nice and very sweet, and you very much liked her the second she turned up on screen. And she was very, very explicitly blunt, sort of doing the whole, I like you, Stephen, I don't think I like you, in that sort of a way. Even though she never actually said it on screen, you can kind of tell that's where it was really going. Although she does do a thing where she wants to run away with him the second she finds out he has money. So I don't know if that makes her a good character or a bad character, but let's move on. The next main female character to be put in the show anyway was a girl called Ella. She was played by I can't remember her name, but the lady who was in. She was also in the 411. Now, if you don't know that, ask your brothers and sisters, kids. Yeah, my God, this makes me feel old. This is part of the all-impressive girl group section of the world. This is how old they are. This is how old the group is in its comparison. I found a video on YouTube of them performing on Top of the Pops. And actually doing it quite well. I can't remember who was Top of the Pops or some other random sort of MTV-esque program. But it was kind of cool to see her, and she could sing, and she was very good at it. And it very much gave the show an excuse to give musical numbers, and to give the very first episode she comes in, we're treated to her rendition of I Want to Break Free from Queen. And they decide to really emphasize the idea of the fact that we know who Queen is by having Basil Brush dress up as, I guess, some kind of tribute to Freddie Mercury. He had the moustache on, which is why I think it might have been the Freddie Mercury tribute, I'm not sure. But Mr. Stephen is dressed up as they do in the music video for that song, where they're dressed up as women, and they're playing the vacuum cleaner like a guitar, and he's doing that. And it's kind of cool to see. It feels very much like an adult joke in a very kids-like show, but I think it's very cool they throw those in there. Certainly if you're watching it back when you're older, you kind of realise and you laugh at these jokes and these references that you didn't get as a kid. It's kind of cool to see. Moving on, the next one after Elle was India. Now, she was the longest running. She was there even after Mr. Stephen left, and even after Molly sort of came and went a lot over the show's run, the usual stuff. But India, again, is very much a singer as well. I don't know where she went with her musical career. I don't know where she came from a musical career even, either. But she's very cool. She's, again, very talented, very funny. Very much likes to stick around and do all this sort of thing. She wasn't in the final season of the show, I do believe, but it was kind of one of those things. But she was very good at what she did, and she was very fun at what she did, and everything else. And I don't know, I guess her character never really stuck out to me. It kind of felt like they were playing their hand so much with changing up a main female character that was involved in their lives, and that kind of distinction really went to Madison. She turned up in about series 3 and just never went away. Madison is the true definition of a blonde. You had sound effects of birds chirping whenever she thought. She would constantly start sentences and stop halfway through. And to top it all off, to really distinguish her from any other character on the show, and I mean every other character on the show, she was American. So she had a touch of the American twang to her voice that really brought it out, and it was really cool. And she brought in characters that that were relatives of hers, that were also American. They came in with some very silly things that the others could get involved in the show, and it was nice. It was nice to see, and it was really cool because when I watched her on screen, I never for a second thought, oh, she's dumb because she's American. That's not how I think the writers did it. The writers wrote her in as just a dumb character. Because every other character that's brought in that had an American accent or was from America or from Australia or any of the other countries that they brought them in from, they weren't dumb. They were 100%. They were more intelligent than our main characters. That's why Madison stuck around so long, I think, because she was dumber than Mr. Steven. She made jokes about him, but she was thicker than him by a long mile, and it was brilliant to watch. You know, it really interests you when you find out that they've made a character opponent on the show, not so they can mock them for being stupid like they did with Mr. Steven, but the fact is that she could get away with it because she happened to be a lot more independent of thought and a lot more unpredictable, I guess is the right word. Unpredictable. And that's really it for the female sort of characters within the show. Like I said, they interchanged a lot, and it was nice. It was nice to see. The other characters in there that are kind of cool are Basil's relatives. You end up meeting a lot of Basil's relatives in the show. The two main ones are his cousin Mortimer and his nephew Bingo. Basil Brush's trademark throughout the show, if you don't know, is ha 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 boom boom. When I did the laugh, I wasn't trying to impersonate Jimmy Carr, just to get that out of the way. That's Jimmy Carr's laugh. I needed to get that out on camera. Moving on. But while Basil Brush's laugh is boom boom, when he says boom boom at the end of his jokes, Mortimer says bang bang, and Bingo says, you guessed it, bing bing. I was kind of half expecting Bingo to sort of yell bing bing and just have Chandler open the door and be like, you called? And then shut the door again. But apparently they never thought about it on the show. Either that or Matthew Perry sort of heard about it and went, no, I'm not doing that. It's one or the other. But that's really it for the characters, and I'll be honest, the characters made the show. The other actors who sort of played the bit roles, like the really, really small, like the episode-only roles, were very funny, and I think they very much kept it to a very strong collection of actors, and I think it was very nice of them to do what they did. The best way I can sort of find to sum up the show, actually, is the very first episode. Because you have the narrator, the voiceover man. He's kind of a character within the show. He just sort of says things and then makes a bad joke and then laughs and walks away or just doesn't say anything. And once he's done that, once he introduces Basil after some of the other characters, Basil's exact line is, on with the show, you know, cameras, music, lights, and then they switch off. And he goes, oh, for goodness sake. Has anyone got 50p for the meter? And then he does his trademark laugh. And that, to me, is the show right there. It's a collection of really silly things, thrown in with some fourth wall breaking, and his trademark laugh of boom boom. And honestly, that to me is the best way to describe Basil Brush. If you have watched the show, I recommend that you go back to YouTube and re-watch some of it. They don't have all the episodes on there, but they do have some of them. If you're new to Basil Brush and you just clicked on this link because you wanted to watch something about someone talking about a show that you never heard of, first of all, you're weird. I like you. You should be a Randomfish with me. You should subscribe, is what I'm saying. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. First off, you're weird. Secondly, you should go and watch the show, because it is truly brilliant, and it is truly well done. And there are some very good episodes in there, and it very much reinforces what I've always believed with this, in that episodes do not make a show. The characters are what make the show. And for me, Basil, Stephen, Molly, Dave, Lucy, Liam, Madison, Anil, Mortimer, Bingo, all of them, they all make the show. they make it funny with their interactions, with their sense of comic timing, with their sense of everything. And you know, just before I go, I just want to share something with you, because I happened to come across a lion who got sued recently. Yeah. He wasn't going to take it lying down. Get it? Boom, boom. I know that was terrible. That was me trying to end on a Basil Brush show joke. A Basil Brush show joke. But anyway, have fun. Go and watch the show now. Enjoy yourself, my little random fishes. Random fish out.